So speaking of suburbs, how picturesque is this family? Like the husband and the wife and the two kids.
This is your stereotypical 1950s America, right? You got the white picket fence, 2.5 kids. You know, you have the milkman delivering, "Good morning, ma'am. Have a great day." You know, everything is perfect rosies. You know, yeah.
Well, this is published in 1947, right? Coming up on that. We're in post-World War II, right? What does the radio mean to a 1947 American?
This is everything for them. This is the centerpiece to the home. As modern Americans, we think of maybe the internet as our centerpiece of the home, or the kitchen, a lot of times people say. The radio was it. This is where they got their entertainment. This is where they got a lot of their news, especially like, you know, quick news. Newspapers are obviously still a thing, but this was kind of a glue that held the family together.
And I have a fun stat that said in 1946, so just before this came out, right? Less than 0.5% of Americans, about 8,000 U.S. households, had a television set.
Wow.
Right. So there's like no saturation whatsoever. But, you know, by 1954, 55% did. And then by 1960, 90% of homes had TV sets, right? So there's very little TV set presence in this era, this writing time. And, you know, it's worth pointing out that the 1940s were known as the golden age of radio.
It for some people that maybe don't listen to the radio because they have, you know, on their phone, they have satellite radio and stuff. This is like the podcast of the era.
Let's go back maybe 10 years. How big your TV set was mattered, right? Like, oh, you've got the 55-inch TV, right? And then the 60 inches came out, and then the 65, and now we're up to 75, 80 inches being affordable, quote unquote, from Walmart for middle class Americans, right? Like, and I realize money goes very differently depending on where you live and such, but we're talking to that middle range bucket that it's an attainable status, right? So our boy Jim is needing to, you know, when we look at post World War II, while there is a GDP, and if you didn't know, if you're new to this channel, we're history nerds, right? There's a GDP bust right after the World War, right? Like the government stopped spending, but it's not really the main story. Like there's this huge boom that happens, consumer and private sectors reinvesting from munitions to household goods, essentially. And jobs are happening, right? Soldiers are coming back and working careers now. That there's this big boom that's about to happen post World War II. So how do you show off, particularly in 1947, your economic status? Well, it's you buy the biggest dang radio you could get.
Yeah, post World War II, not only are we seeing a continuing surge of spending, but the war innovated technology like almost never seen before in human history. And now you have, you know, electric refrigerators, electric toasters. You have all these new technologies. And one of the ways of showing off how well your family is doing is you're getting a car, you're getting a radio, you're getting these new technological marvels that are showing off your wealth and status to the neighborhood.
Right. Which, I mean, we think Jim's doing that on some level, right? Or at least I suspect he feels obligated, right, to come home, because Irene probably doesn't work, right? They have a maid. She probably stays at home taking care of her kids as her full-time expectation. So Jim feels like this desire, I feel like, to not work with Irene to make the decision. Like he just comes home, he's like, here's the radio, right? And, you know, how does Irene react to this ginormous radio appearing in her living room one day?
She's not too happy about this. She describes it as an aggressive intruder, but I think she's going to warm up to it eventually.
Well, I think she's very meticulous, right? Like they say that she picks out her living room decor, like her clothes, you know, and you know, just kind of jump ahead. If we view this radio as like this economic status, you can also view it as like this warning about technology, this warning about peering in on neighbors and such. So it's not just that Jim went crazy and smashed it at the end, right? It's the fact that he's ripping down a lot of the symbols and a lot of the status and a lot of the show, which I think is also a big theme of this, is what are you versus what do you show yourself as?
as we've talked about many times before on the channel, that we all have masks. We have something that we present to our family and friends. We have something that we present to work and our boss. We have something to present to society as a whole. And then we have our internal self. And I think here, for me, the one thing that I pulled out from this is that they're peering in past those masks without the people knowing. And you get to see people's true selves. And then they're starting to judge on top of that. And this gives them a perspective they've never seen before. And they have thoughts that are intruding in people's personal lives that they've never had before. And their opinions start to change about others and then eventually themselves as well, which I think is, a lot of us can relate to.
Do you think, I hadn't really thought about this, but this is the way you describe that, like, it almost becomes like an obsession to Irene, right? Like she originally just had distaste for this, but once she realized the radio allowed her to see behind the mask, as you kind of put it, allows her to see, I don't know if I want to say it's the inner monologue, right? Because these are still conversations that are happening externally, but they're in private locations, right? So you get this like dopamine hit, this excitement of being able to see things that you're not supposed to. It's kind of like the whole Harry Potter, like, I think, in my opinion, J.K. Rowling struggled with, how do I get Harry this information? So she invented this invisible robe to allow him to eavesdrop on conversations because she couldn't figure out how to make that come out, and it was a fun way to do it, right? This radio is that magic cape for Irene. She gets to hear these conversations she shouldn't be able to, and I think it becomes addictive to her. Right? She starts canceling events, avoiding friends because she wants to come home and listen to the radio in some regards.
And we can all relate to that, right? This is, to me, the equivalent of non-scripted reality TV. She's getting to see real people's lives. You go on YouTube or TikTok or whatever, and you see people's real lives, and you get that dopamine hit, and it makes you feel maybe good about yourself that you're not in that predicament, you're not in that circumstance, or we're nosy, I don't know, maybe you aren't, but it's kind of fun to know things when you aren't supposed to.
Do you think you would be the Irene in this story? Like, if you could actually hear those conversations you're not supposed to, right? And if you think about it, I don't know. You tell me your view, I guess. But like, this is kind of pre-Cold War, like May 1947. Not that there weren't attitudes leading up to it, but there was like this explosion in how much do I trust my neighbor, right? And people kind of became obsessed with listening in on others. Not that I'm not trying to make the argument that that's what Cheever's story is about. Don't get me wrong. But I think there's an element of people are obsessed with learning the secret. Do you think you would have been that person? Because I'll tell you, from my perspective, it'd be hard to resist on some levels.
It would be hard to resist. The story is definitely very voyeuristic in nature. And I just think that as humans, I think we're inquisitive of the other animals on this planet. And I think just knowing other people's gossip is something that is a siren song. And I think that it's hard to resist knowing other people's dirty secrets, because it makes you maybe feel better about your own.
That was going to be my point. Is it you're wanting to know the dirty secrets of others, or is it you're wanting to know you're not alone, right? Because if we look at like the ring that was lost that we're going to pawn, again, I guess there's a consumerism versus humanity view here, right? You have that boy that he didn't want to go to school, and the parents were like, we paid $800, like, you'll die before we let you not go, or something along those lines. Don't quote me. But it's all about that material product being more important than seeing the person and humanity. And I think we all might struggle with that a little bit. So maybe that voyeuristic view to say, I'm not alone in what these, I'm told, are evil thoughts. Like, you could see other people have just as many dark desires as you do.
Yeah. And I guess that makes it easier for you to not deny I don't want to say evil, but deny those urges within yourself and be like, oh, other people are doing it, so it's okay if I do it. And I remember having this experience in college of seeing people in certain situations in very controlled environments, and then seeing them outside of those controlled environments where they behaved and spoke and acted like a completely different person. And it was a revelation to me of, wow, people really are different. And when you get them, when they think they're alone behind closed doors, you really see their true selves.
Well, and that's just it, right? Like, it's not that other people have these dark desires so I can have them too. It's I can justify them, right? It's the young Goodman Brown, if you remember, like we can see other people are just as evil. We just don't show that. There's that element of show. Like going back to the consumer perspective, consumerism matters not because, okay, this is a broad statement, but generally it's not because just you get to consume stuff. It's generally that you can show others what you've consumed, right? Fashion is this whole idea of it doesn't matter in 2020, particularly. Remember, Crocs exploded. The ugliest freaking shoe that we've known to mankind exploded in 2020. Like loungewear, the more baggy clothes became more popular. Why? Because of the people we weren't seeing, right? Like we were staying home as opposed to going out. So you know, how many of these dark desires start to come out when it becomes publicly admissible, but also that consumerist element of being for the external.
I think that kind of brings us back full circle to the whole story is you have consumerism, the radio, the technology, the new stuff, the showing off, but this also gives them an avenue into other people's lives. And I think that in a modern time frame, we can appreciate that because a lot of people are just putting that out there, you know, for people to see without having to sneak around, just throwing it on the internet and giving their lives away or charging for it, that we can see that there is a relationship between people, whether they know it or not.
So in the end, Jim destroys the radio, right? And it's part of this whole, like, you know, he kind of lets out the dirty secrets. Irene didn't let us, the reader, know the secrets, right? We learned them from Jim going crazy and talking about the pregnancy and all sorts of things that might be publicly condemnable, right? Is Jim's destroying the radio, you know, is that severing the tie to say it's okay to have these dark desires? Is it severing the warning of technology, that the way that it can invade privacy today, how easy it is to have all of our personal information stolen and such? Is it a revolt against consumerism where he's starting to see the evil of it? Like how did you view Jim's final actions in the story?
I took it as his redemption arc, that he was trying to go against his darker nature and say, we're better than this. We can rise above this. And I know that's odd coming from me, but it felt like a turning point of, he said, this has consumed our lives and made us worse people. And we don't want this in our lives anymore. They're, you know, and you can see that even today, right? Where people are like, I'm taking a social media break, and they'll post on their Facebook or their Twitter or wherever. And they're saying, if you don't see me post anything, or if I don't respond to anything for a month, 2 months, I'm taking a break. I'm stepping away from this because the toxicity there is harming me. And I don't want that in my life anymore. And that's what Jim has done, just a little bit more permanently.
Yeah. And talk about a world of external views of specifically putting your best foot forward, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. So for our audience, keep in touch. You know, we'd love to hear from you what your thoughts are on the story. Subscribe. For those of you that are looking to get more involved, you know, check out some of the links that we have down below in the description box. My name's Manuna. Thank you for spending time with us. We're going to leave a link of John Cheever playlist down below of other talks we've had on John Cheever. So appreciate you spending some time with us today. Peace.
Peace.